The bridge of the Harmony's edge hummed with quiet activity. Admiral Zethkara stood before the main viewing screen, her crystalline body catching the light from distant stars. She was tall, even for her species, and her blue-tinted form sparkled as she moved. Around her, crew members from a dozen different worlds worked at their stations. Navigation Officer Quillenth looked up from his console. His forearms moved quickly over the controls as he checked their position. "Admiral," he said in his clicking voice, "we are approaching Sector 779. Zethkara turned toward him. Her face, though alien, showed concern. "How close to the border?" 50 light-years, ma'am. We will be at minimum safe distance in 6 hours. A young officer at the weapons station shifted uncomfortably. Lieutenant Commander Vextari was new to the ship. She had joined them only 3 months ago from the Talon Empire's fleet. Her red skin marked her as one of the warrior race, but her inexperience showed in her nervous movements. Admiral Vextari said, "I don't understand. My briefing files show this sector as empty space. Why do we need to maintain distance from nothing?" The bridge went quiet. Even the usual hum of the engines seemed to fade. Older crew members looked at each other with worried expressions. Some had been serving on council ships for decades. They all knew the stories. Chief Engineer Morden, an ancient being covered in gray scales, slowly turned from his station. His eyes were old and tired. "Young one," he said in a voice like grinding stone, "that sector is not empty. It is forbidden." Vextari frowned. "Forbidden by who?" "The Council controls all space lanes. There's nothing in the files about, because some things are too dangerous to put in files," interrupted Communications Officer Ylthera. Her tentacles writhed as she spoke, a sign of deep anxiety among her people. "That region, we call it the Dead Sector." "Dead?" Vextari stood up from her station. "What died there?" Admiral Zethkara walked to the center of the bridge. She had commanded ships for over 70 years. She had fought pirates, explored unknown worlds, and negotiated peace between warring species. But this topic always made her uncomfortable. "Sit down, Lieutenant Commander," she said softly. "What you're about to hear is not in any official record." The Council made sure of that. But every captain, every admiral, every crew member who has served long enough knows the truth. Vextari returned to her seat, but her eyes remained fixed on the Admiral. Zethkara began to pace slowly. 150 years ago, that sector was not empty. It was home to a species we had just discovered. They called themselves humans. Humans. Vextari had never heard the name. "They were young," Morden said, his voice heavy with memory. "Their technology was primitive compared to ours. They had only just learned to travel between stars. But they were ... different. Different how?" Vextari asked. Quillenth looked up from his navigation station. "They refused to follow the rules." "What rules?" Admiral Zethkara stopped pacing. "The same rules every species must follow when they join galactic civilization. They must give up their weapons. They must accept guidance from older, wiser races. They must abandon primitive ideas about individual rights and national borders." "But humans said no," Ylthera added, her tentacles still moving nervously. Vextari looked confused. "They said no to the entire Galactic Council." "Not at first," Zethkara explained. "When we made first contact, they seemed reasonable. Their diplomats were polite. They signed trade agreements. They even sent representatives to council meetings." "So what changed?" Morden's old eyes grew distant. "The council demanded they surrender their military. All of it. Their ships, their weapons, their soldiers. They were told this was necessary for galactic peace." "That sounds reasonable, Vextari," said. "The humans didn't think so," Quillenth replied. "They said they needed to defend themselves." "Against what?" "They were under council protection." Admiral Zethkara's crystalline form seemed to dim. "They said they needed to defend themselves against us." The bridge fell silent again. In the background, the ship's computers continued their quiet work, monitoring space around them, keeping them safe from the dangers of deep space. But no computer could protect them from the memories that haunted the older crew members. I was there, Morden said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at the ancient engineer. He rarely spoke about his past. I was young then, serving on a council enforcement ship. We were part of the fleet sent to convince the humans to cooperate. How big was the fleet? Vextari asked. 10,000 ships, Morden said quietly. 12 different species. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Vextari's eyes widened. 10,000 ships against one primitive species. The council wanted to make sure there would be no resistance, Zethkara explained. It was meant to be a show of force. The humans would see they had no choice but to surrender. But they didn't surrender, Ylthera said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Morden confirmed. They fought. How could they fight? You said. Their technology was primitive. Admiral Zethkara moved to the viewing screen and stared out at the stars. That's what we thought too. We were wrong. The humans had something we didn't understand, Quillen said. They fought like no species we had ever encountered. They used tactics that seemed impossible. They turned our own weapons against us. But even so, Vextari protested, 10,000 ships against a few hundred human vessels. The outcome should have been certain. It was certain, Morden said grimly. Just not in the way we expected. The old engineer stood up slowly, walked to a wall display. He called up a star chart showing their current position. The map showed their ship as a small dot, surrounded by the normal colors indicating safe space. But nearby was a large area marked in black. This is the dead sector, he said, pointing to the black region. 200 light-years across. Nothing goes in, nothing comes out. Why? Vextari asked. Because the humans won, Admiral Zethkara said simply. Vextari stared at her. That's impossible. You said they were outnumbered 50-1. They were, Zethkara agreed. But they did something we never expected. Something we couldn't understand. Something that changed the very nature of space itself. I don't understand. Morden turned away from the display. The humans had a weapon. Not the kind that destroys ships or kills crews. A weapon that changes reality itself. What kind of weapon could do that? We still don't know, Ylthara admitted. The few ships that escaped the battle brought back reports that made no sense. Space itself had become hostile to non-human life. Admiral Zethkara returned to her command chair. The war lasted only 3 days. When it ended, 8,000 council ships were drifting dead in space. Their crews were alive, but changed. They couldn't think properly anymore. They couldn't remember who they were or where they came from. What happened to them? We brought them home, Morden said sadly. But they never recovered. They lived the rest of their lives in medical facilities, staring at nothing, sometimes speaking in languages that didn't exist. Vextari felt a chill run through her body. And the humans. They disappeared into that sector, Zethkara said. We never saw them again. But we know they're still there. How do you know? The Admiral looked directly at the young officer. Because, every few years, we receive a message from the edge of their space. Always the same warning, do not enter. We are no longer what we were. The bridge remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Vextari spoke again, her voice small and uncertain. What do you think they meant? We are no longer what we were. Admiral Zethkara stood up and walked toward the viewing screen one more time. In the distance, stars twinkled peacefully, giving no hint of the horrors that lay hidden in the darkness between them. I think, she said slowly, that the humans paid a terrible price for their victory, and I think we should be grateful that they chose to pay it alone. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the USN Defiant, watching the stars through the main view screen. 300 years had passed since that moment, but the memory lived on in the stories told throughout the galaxy. She was a woman, of average height, with short brown hair and tired eyes. The weight of command showed in every line of her face. "Admiral," called Lieutenant Jake Collins from the communications station. "We're receiving another message from the Council ship." Kate sighed. "Put it through." The image of Ambassador Veltar appeared on the screen. The tall, blue-skinned alien looked down at her with what humans had learned to recognize as barely controlled impatience. "Admiral Morrison," Veltar said in his melodic voice, "the Council grows tired of these delays. Your species has had 6 months to consider our generous offer." Kate kept her expression neutral. "Ambassador, with respect. Demanding that we surrender all our military assets and submit to Council oversight is hardly generous. It is standard procedure for all primitive species joining galactic civilization," Veltar replied coldly. "Your refusal to cooperate shows exactly why such guidance is necessary." Behind Kate, Captain Lisa Brooks of the USN Valiant clenched her fists. Lisa was younger than Kate, with red hair and the kind of fierce expression that made enemies think twice. She had been present at every negotiation session, watching the Council's representatives treat humanity like children who needed to be taught proper behavior. "Our independence is not negotiable," Kate said firmly. "Independence?" Veltar Salian features showed what might have been amusement. "Admiral, your entire species controls a handful of star systems. The Council governs thousands of worlds across the galaxy. What you call independence, we call ignorance." Ambassador John Carter, Earth's chief diplomat, stepped forward. John was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes, but months have failed. Negotiations had worn him down. "Surely we can find a compromise," he said. "Humanity has much to offer the galactic community." "Indeed you do," Veltar agreed. "Your species shows remarkable potential. That is precisely why you need proper guidance. Left to your own devices, you will inevitably destroy yourselves. It is the pattern we have seen with dozens of species." Kate felt her anger rising, but kept it hidden. "Other species chose to surrender. Their freedom. We choose differently." "Freedom." Veltar's voice took on a sharp edge. "Admiral, freedom is a luxury that primitive species cannot afford. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Only under Council protection can young races survive long enough to mature." Captain Danny Williams, commanding the USN Horizon, spoke up from his position near the tactical station. Danny was a tall man with dark skin and intelligent eyes. He had studied the Council's history more than most humans. "Protection or control, Ambassador? Because from where I stand, they look very similar." Veltar's image flickered with what the humans had learned was a sign of irritation. "Captain Williams, your species has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. The youngest Council member race has been traveling between stars for over 3,000 years. Do you truly believe you know better than we do?" "We know what's best for humanity," Lisa Brooks said quietly. Her voice was calm, but everyone who knew her recognized the warning tone. "And that's not submission to an empire that treats us like children." "An empire?" Veltar's tone turned cold. "The Galactic Council is not an empire, Captain Brooks. It is a cooperative organization dedicated to peace and order among the stars." Kate stepped forward again. "A cooperative organization that demands complete military surrender from any species that wants to join, for their own protection, yes. And if we refuse?" For the first time in the conversation, Veltar smiled. It was not a pleasant expression on his alien features. "Admiral Morrison, I hope you will reconsider. The Council has ways of dealing with uncooperative species." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the defiant, intense silence. "That sounded like a threat," Danny Williams observed. John Carter rubbed his temples. "I'm afraid it was, Captain." Kate turned to face her. "Officers. Status report." How long before our defensive preparations are complete? Lisa Brooks consulted her tablet. The orbital platforms around Earth will be ready in 2 weeks. Mars defenses are already online. The outer system warning stations are operational. What about the other colonies? New Haven and Prosperity have basic defensive grids. Nothing that could stop a serious attack, but enough to give us early warning. Kate nodded grimly. And our fleet? Danny Williams answered from memory. 237 ships, Admiral, destroyers, cruisers, and 15 battleships, all equipped with the new plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes. Against how many council ships? The bridge fell quiet. Everyone knew the numbers, but speaking them aloud made the situation feel more real. Intelligence estimates between 8 and 10,000 ships, John Carter said quietly, representing 12 different species. Kate walked to the view screen and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the largest military force in galactic history was gathering. Their mission was simple: force humanity to surrender or destroy them completely. Admiral Lisa Brooks said, "There's something else. Dr. Sam Rodriguez has been asking to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Kate turned. Sam Rodriguez, the physicist. "Yes, ma'am. He's been working on some kind of classified project. He won't discuss it over normal communication channels. Send him up." 20 minutes later, Dr. Sam Rodriguez arrived on the bridge. He was a thin man with dark hair and nervous energy that made him fidget constantly. His clothes were wrinkled, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Admiral Morrison," he said, slightly out of breath. "I need to speak with you privately." Kate led him to her ready room just off the bridge. The small office contained her desk, a few chairs, and a wall display showing the current tactical situation. Sam sat down heavily, as if the weight of what he carried was physical. "Doctor, I'm told you have something urgent to discuss." Sam rubbed his face with both hands. "Admiral, I've been working on something. Something that could change everything." "What kind of something?" "A weapon," Sam said quietly. "But not the kind you're thinking of. This doesn't destroy matter or energy. It changes the fundamental structure of space-time itself." Kate sat down, across from him. "I'm not sure I understand." "Think of reality as a set of rules," Sam explained, his hands moving as he spoke. "Gravity works this way. Light travels at this speed. Matter behaves according to these principles. What if you could rewrite those rules in a specific area? Is that possible?" "I think so. I've been working with quantum mechanics at levels no one has attempted before. The mathematics suggest that with enough energy, you could create a localized region where the laws of physics operate differently." Kate felt a chill. "Different how?" "That's the problem," Sam admitted. "I don't know exactly. The calculations show that it would be hostile to non-human consciousness, but I can't predict the specific effects." "Non-human consciousness? What about human consciousness?" "Humans might be able to survive in the altered region, but double quotes." Sam paused, looking uncomfortable. "Admiral, anyone exposed to the field during its creation would be changed, permanently. I don't know into what." Kate stared at him. "Doctor, are you telling me you've created a weapon that would trap us in our own space?" "Yes," Sam said simply. "But it would also make our space completely uninhabitable for any other species. No alien force could invade or occupy our worlds, at the cost of our ability to leave, probably." Kate stood up and walked to the wall display. It showed the current positions of human ships and colonies. Everything humanity had achieved in 3 centuries of space exploration fit on a single screen. How long before this weapon could be ready? If the Council gives us time, several years. If they attack tomorrow? Sam shrugged. "I'd have to activate it untested. And if it doesn't work, then humanity becomes part of the Council's empire, assuming they leave any of us alive after the conquest." Kate studied the display for a long time. When she finally spoke, Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Doctor, I need you to prepare your weapon. I pray we won't need it, but if the choice is between slavery and exile," she turned to face him, "we'll choose exile." Sam nodded slowly. "I'll begin preparations immediately." "Admiral, there's one more thing. Once activated, the field will be permanent. There's no way to reverse it. I understand." After Sam left, Kate returned to the bridge. Her officers looked up expectantly, but she said nothing about the conversation. Instead, she walked to her command chair and sat down. "Admiral," Jake Collins called from communications. "We're receiving multiple hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system." Kate felt her stomach drop. "How many?" "I count 40 ships so far, ma'am, more arriving every minute." Lisa Brooks checked her tactical display. "They're maintaining position at the hyperspace limit. No aggressive moves yet. They're giving us one last chance to surrender," Danny Williams observed. Kate stared at the tactical screen as more and more enemy contacts appeared. The Council fleet was massive, overwhelming, and utterly confident in their victory. "Send a message to all human ships and colonies," she ordered. "Tell them the Council fleet has arrived. Tell them we will not surrender." As the communications officer sent her message across human space, Kate Morrison prepared for the most important battle in human history. She knew they couldn't win through conventional warfare, but thanks to Dr. Sam Rodriguez, they might not have to. Captain Danny Williams gripped the arms of his command chair as the USN Horizon shook under enemy fire. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations. Through the view screen, he could see the massive Council fleet filling space like a swarm of deadly insects. "Damage report," Danny shouted over the noise of alarms. "Forward shields down to 60%, reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Amy Foster. Amy was young, barely 25, but she had proven herself in 3 previous battles. Her blonde hair was tied back tightly, and her blue eyes showed no fear, despite the impossible odds they faced. "Engineering reports power fluctuations in the main reactor," added Chief Engineer Pete Murphy. Pete was an older man with calloused hands and the kind of practical knowledge that kept ships running when everything else failed. Danny watched the tactical display. 200 human ships faced over 8,000 Council vessels. The numbers were so overwhelming that the battle computers couldn't even calculate proper odds. "Sir," Amy called out, "the Valiant is requesting assistance. They're taking heavy fire from a Council battle group." Danny looked at the display. Captain Lisa Brooks and her crew were surrounded by 6 alien ships, each one larger than any human vessel. The Valiant was fighting bravely, but she couldn't survive much longer against those odds. "Helm, bring us about. All weapons target the lead Council ship attacking the Valiant." The Horizon turned toward the enemy formation. Danny's ship was fast and well-armed, but it was still just one ship against thousands. They could save Lisa Brooks and her crew, but it would only delay the inevitable. "Firing," Amy announced. The Horizon's plasma cannons lanced out, striking the nearest Council vessel. The alien ship's shields flared and failed. Secondary explosions rippled across its hull. "Good shooting," Danny said. "Target the next ship." On the main communications channel, he could hear Admiral Kate Morrison coordinating the desperate defense from the USN Defiant. Her voice was calm, despite the chaos around them. "All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessels," Kate ordered. "Make them pay for every meter of space." Danny smiled grimly. Kate Morrison had been his commanding officer for 5 years. She was the kind of leader who never gave up, even when faced with impossible odds. If anyone could find a way to win this battle, it would be her. But deep down, Danny knew they weren't trying to win. They were buying time for Dr. Sam Rodriguez to activate his weapon. The question was whether they could survive long enough for him to complete his work. "Captain," Amy reported, "sensors show massive energy buildup on Luna base. Whatever Dr. Rodriguez is doing, it's drawing power from the entire lunar grid." Danny nodded. Luna Base was humanity's most advanced research facility, hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. If Sam's weapon was going to work, that's where it would happen. Sir, the communications officer called out. Message from Admiral Morrison. She's ordering all ships to fall back to Earth orbit. Fall back. Pete Murphy looked confused. That doesn't make sense. If we retreat now, they'll destroy our outer defenses. Danny understood immediately. She's pulling us closer to Earth. When the weapon activates, she wants all human ships within the protective zone. The retreat began immediately. Human ships broke off from their individual battles and moved toward Earth. The Council fleet followed, thinking they had won a decisive victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. On Luna Base, Dr. Sam Rodriguez worked frantically in his laboratory. The thin physicist was covered in sweat, his hands shaking as he made final adjustments to equipment that no human had ever built before. Around him, his team of scientists and engineers prepared for an experiment that would change everything. Power levels at 90%, reported Dr. Janet Mills, Sam's assistant. Janet was a young woman with black hair and sharp eyes. She had helped Sam develop the theoretical framework for the weapon, but neither of them truly understood what would happen when they activated it. Quantum field generators are online, added Dr. Paul Wright, the team's expert on exotic matter. Paul was a heavy-set man with graying hair who looked more like a mechanic than a scientist, but his understanding of quantum physics was second. 2. None. Sam stared at the control panel in front of him. One switch would activate the weapon. One switch would change the nature of space-time itself across 200 light-years of territory. One switch would save humanity or destroy them. Dr. Rodriguez, Janet said quietly, the Council fleet is approaching Earth orbit. Admiral Morrison is requesting immediate activation. Sam's finger hovered over the switch. He thought about his wife and children, safe in the underground shelters beneath New Geneva. He thought about the millions of humans across dozens of worlds who were counting on him. He thought about the price they would all pay if his weapon worked. Paul, he said, are you ready? Dr. Wright nodded grimly. The containment fields are stable. If this works, we should survive the initial activation. And if it doesn't work, then none of this will matter. Sam closed his eyes and activated the weapon. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Space around Earth began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The stars themselves seemed to bend and twist as the fundamental laws of physics rewrote themselves. On the bridge of the USN horizon, Danny Williams felt a strange sensation wash over him. It was like falling and flying at the same time. His vision blurred, and for a moment he couldn't remember where he was or what he was doing. Captain. Amy Foster's voice sounded distant and strange. Something's happening to the Council ships. Danny forced himself to focus on the tactical display. What he saw there would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Council fleet had stopped moving. 8,000 ships hung motionless in space, their engines still running, but their crews no longer responding to communications. On the few channels that remained open, the sounds coming through were not words in any language. They were the sounds of minds breaking under the weight of a reality they could not comprehend. What's happening to them? Pete Murphy asked in a whisper. Danny watched as alien crew members stumbled through their ships like sleepwalkers. They moved without purpose, their eyes staring at things that weren't there. Some of them spoke constantly, in languages that followed no logical pattern. Others stood perfectly still, as if they had forgotten how to move. They're alive, Amy reported, her voice full of horror. Life signs are normal, but their brain activity, it doesn't make sense. It's like they're experiencing reality in dimensions we can't perceive. The weapon had worked exactly as Dr. Rodriguez had predicted. The Council forces were not dead, but they were no longer mentally present in baseline reality. They existed. in a state between life and madness, aware but unable to process what they were experiencing. "Sir," the communications officer said, "Admiral Morrison is ordering all ships to maintain position. No one is to approach the Council vessels." Danny understood. The weapon had created a barrier that protected humans, but destroyed alien minds. Getting too close to the affected ships might expose them to whatever force had broken the alien crews. Hours passed. The Council fleet continued to drift, powered but pilotless. Occasionally, a ship would fire its weapons randomly into space, or attempt to jump to hyperspace, only to reappear seconds later in the same location. The space around Earth had become a prison for any non-human consciousness. "Captain," Amy said, "long-range sensors are detecting Council ships at the edge of the system. They're not approaching." Danny looked at the sensor readings. A few dozen. Council vessels had survived by being far enough away when the weapon activated. Now they maintained their distance, afraid to enter the area where their allies had lost their minds. They know what happened, he realized. They've seen what their fleet became. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communications channel. "One final time. All human ships, this is Admiral Morrison. The immediate threat has passed, but our situation has changed permanently. Dr. Rodriguez reports that the quantum field is stable and irreversible. We are now isolated from the rest of the galaxy." Danny felt a chill run through him. They had one, but the price was higher than anyone had imagined. Admiral Amy asked, "What about the Council ships? What do we do with them?" Kate's response was quiet and sad. "We'll evacuate their crews to the edge of the system. It's the mercy we can show them. But their ships will remain here as a reminder of what happens when someone tries to force humanity to surrender." In the months that followed, human crews carefully evacuated the alien survivors from the drifting Council ships. The rescued aliens were returned to the edge of human space, but they never recovered from their experience. They lived the rest of their lives in medical facilities, their minds forever changed by their brief exposure to the altered reality that now surrounded Earth. The Council never again sent a fleet into human space. The warning was clear. This was what happened to those who threatened humanity's freedom. The humans had chosen exile over slavery, and they had the power to enforce that choice. Captain Danny Williams remained on patrol duty for another 10 years. He watched the border between human and normal space, making sure that no other species made the same mistake the Council had made. Sometimes he wondered what humanity was becoming in their isolated region of space, but he never regretted the choice they had made. Freedom, he had learned, was worth any price. 6 months after the battle, Captain Danny Williams stood in the medical bay of the USN Horizon, watching Dr. Sarah Kim examine one of his crew members. The young ensign, Bobby Martinez, lay on the examination table with a confused expression on his face. "Doctor," Danny asked quietly, "what's wrong with him?" Dr. Kim was a small woman with dark hair and tired eyes. She had been treating similar cases for weeks now. "It's the same thing we've seen in others who spend too much time near the border zone," she explained. "Memory gaps, confusion, difficulty with basic reasoning. Will he recover?" "I don't know, Captain. We're dealing with something completely new here." Danny looked down at Bobby Martinez. The young man had been one of his best navigation officers. Now he couldn't remember how to plot a simple course between planets. This was the price they were paying for their victory over the Council. "How many cases do we have ship-wide?" Danny asked. 17 so far. All crew members who were on duty during extended patrols near the quantum field boundary. Danny felt a weight settling in his stomach. "Doctor, what exactly is happening to them?" Sarah Kim pulled up a brain scan on her computer screen. "Look at this. This is a normal human brain scan." She switched to another image. "This is Ensign Martinez's brain after his last patrol." Danny stared at the two images. Even to his untrained eye, the differences were obvious. "What am I looking at?" The second scan shows increased activity in areas of the brain we don't fully understand. It's like his mind is trying to process information that doesn't exist in normal reality. The same thing that happened to the council crews. Similar, but not as severe. Humans seem to have some natural resistance to the effect, but prolonged exposure is still dangerous. Danny left the medical bay with a heavy heart. He made his way to the bridge, where his first officer, Commander Linda Hayes, was reviewing patrol reports. "How's Martinez?" Linda asked. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the kind of steady demeanor that made her perfect for command positions. "Not good," Danny replied. "Dr. Kim thinks he'll need extended treatment, maybe permanent medical retirement." Linda nodded sadly. "He's not the only one. I've been getting reports from other ships. The Vigilant has 8 cases. The Guardian has 12. All ships on border patrol." "Yes, sir." "It seems like the quantum field has an area of influence beyond what Dr. Rodriguez originally calculated." Danny sat down in his command chair and stared at the main view screen. Outside, space looked normal, but he knew that appearances were deceiving. The very fabric of reality around them had been changed, and they were only beginning to understand the consequences. "Commander Hayes," he said, "send a message to Admiral Morrison. Request permission to return to Earth orbit for extended crew rotation." "Sir, that will leave a gap in the border patrol. I'd rather have a gap than lose more crew members to whatever this thing is doing to us." Meanwhile, on Luna Base, Dr. Sam Rodriguez was discovering his own problems. The physicist sat in his laboratory, staring at equations that no longer made sense to him. The numbers and symbols seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Janet Mills entered the lab carrying a cup of coffee. "You've been here for 16 hours straight. You need to rest." Sam looked up at her, and Janet was shocked by what she saw. His eyes had a distant, unfocused quality that reminded her of the alien survivors they had evacuated from the council ships. "Janet," Sam said slowly, "I can see things that aren't there." "What kind of things?" "Equations. Mathematical relationships. That exist in the quantum field, but not in normal space. It's like having access to knowledge that shouldn't exist." Janet set down the coffee and activated a medical scanner. "Sam, your brain activity is off the charts. You're showing the same patterns we've seen in the border patrol crews." "I know," Sam said calmly. "I was exposed to the full force of the field during activation. I'm changing faster than the others. Changing into what?" Sam smiled, but it wasn't entirely human anymore. "I don't know, but I can feel it happening. I can think in ways that I never could before. I can see mathematical truths that would take normal humans years to discover." Janet felt afraid. "Sam, we need to get you to a medical facility." "No," Sam said firmly. "I need to finish my work. The quantum field is still expanding. Slowly, but measurably. Eventually, it will encompass all of human space." "What does that mean?" "It means every human will eventually be affected. We're all going to change, Janet. The question is whether we can control how we change." Admiral Kate Morrison received the reports from across human space with growing alarm. The quantum field was having effects no one had predicted. Humans could survive in the altered space, but they weren't surviving unchanged. She called a meeting of her senior staff aboard the USN Defiant. Captain Lisa Brooks attended in person, while other commanders joined via holographic communication. The conference room was filled with the ghostly images of ship captains and colony administrators from across human territory. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kate began, "we have a serious problem. The quantum field that saved us from the council is slowly changing our people." Captain Brooks leaned forward. "How serious are we talking, Admiral?" "Dr. Rodriguez estimates that, within 50 years, no human will be able to survive outside the quantum field for more than a few hours. We're becoming adapted to the altered space-time. But that adaptation makes us incompatible with normal reality. Colony Administrator Mark Johnson spoke up from his position on New Haven. Admiral, what are our options? Kate looked around the room at the faces of her commanders. These were good people, brave people who had fought to defend humanity's freedom. Now she had to tell them that their victory was becoming their prison. We have 3 choices, she said. First, we can try to find a way to reverse the quantum field and return to normal space. Is that possible? Asked Captain Williams from the horizon. Dr. Rodriguez says no. The field is self-sustaining and permanent. Any attempt to disrupt it could destroy every human world. What's the second option? Lisa Brooks asked. We accept our isolation and adapt to life within the quantum field. We build a new civilization, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. And the third option? Kate was quiet for a long moment. We evacuate human space while we still can. Abandon our colonies and try to find a place in normal space, under council rule. The room erupted in angry voices. Every commander spoke at once, rejecting the idea of surrender after everything they had sacrificed. That's not an option, Lisa Brooks said firmly. We didn't fight the council just to surrender to them later. Then we're choosing isolation, Kate said, but I want everyone to understand what that means. In a few generations, our descendants may not even be recognizably human anymore. Ambassador John Carter, now elderly and serving as the civilian representative to the military council, raised his hand for attention. Admiral, perhaps that's not such a terrible thing. Everyone turned to look at him. Think about it, John continued. Humanity has always been defined by our ability to adapt and overcome challenges. Maybe this is just the next step in our evolution. Evolution into what? Captain Williams asked. Into something that can survive and thrive in conditions that would destroy any other species in the galaxy. Into something that the Council and their fleets can never threaten again. Kate considered his words. John, are you suggesting we embrace this change? I'm suggesting we stop seeing it as a problem and start seeing it as an opportunity. Yes, we'll be different. Yes, we'll be isolated, but we'll be free. Dr. Rodriguez, joining the meeting via communication link from Luna Base, spoke up for the first time. His voice sounded strange, as if it was coming from very far away. The change is already irreversible, he said. We can fight it and suffer, or we can guide it and grow, but we cannot stop it. Kate looked around the room one more time. Very well. We'll proceed with adaptation protocols. All colonies will begin preparing for permanent isolation. All ships will be retrofitted for operation within the quantum field only. What about contact with the outside galaxy? Lisa Brooks asked. Kate smiled sadly. We'll send one final message to the Council and any other species listening. We'll tell them that humanity chooses freedom over integration. We'll tell them to remember us as we were, because we won't be the same species when we meet again. As the meeting ended and the commanders returned to their ships, Kate Morrison remained in the conference room alone. She thought about the choice they had made and the price they would pay for their freedom. In choosing to resist the Council, humanity had saved itself from slavery. But in saving itself, humanity had also chosen to become something else entirely. Whether that something would be better or worse than what they had been remained to be seen. Outside the viewports of the Defiant, the stars looked the same as they always had. But Kate knew that appearances were deceiving. They were no longer the same stars, and humanity was no longer the same species that had first looked up at them with wonder. The age of human isolation had begun. Lieutenant Commander Vextari stared at the tactical display on the bridge of the Harmony's edge. The young officer from the Talon Empire had listened to the entire story with growing amazement and horror. Now, as Admiral Zethkara finished her tale, Vextari struggled to understand what she had heard. Admiral, she said quietly, that was 150 years ago. Surely the humans are all dead by now. Chief Engineer Morden turned slowly from his station. The ancient being's scales had grown darker over the years, and his movements were careful and deliberate. "Young one," he said in his grinding voice, "the humans are not dead." "How can you be sure?" Communications Officer Yiltharis Tentacles writhed nervously. "Because we still receive their messages." Vextari looked confused. "What messages?" Admiral Zethkara walked to the communications station and activated a recording device. "This message was received 3 months ago at the border monitoring station in Sector 7. The voice that came through the speakers was human, but there was something wrong with it. It sounded distant and strange, as if the speaker existed partially in another dimension. This is a warning to all non-human vessels. Do not enter the space once occupied by the human species. We are no longer what we were. We are no longer what you could survive meeting. This message will repeat." The recording ended, leaving the bridge in silence. "That's all?" Vextari asked. "That's all they ever say," Zethkara replied. "The same warning, every few years, broadcast from automated beacons along their border." Navigation Officer Quillenth looked up from his console. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from Council Command. Put it through." The image of Fleet Admiral Kextel appeared on the main screen. The insectoid leader of the Council forces looked agitated, his compound eyes reflecting the light in patterns that indicated extreme concern. Admiral Zethkara Kextel said, "How close are you to the dead sector?" 50 light-years, sir." "Standard safe distance?" "Increase that distance to 100 light-years immediately." Zethkara felt a chill run through her crystalline form. "Sir, may I ask why?" "Our long-range monitoring stations have detected massive construction activity within the dead sector. Something is building ships." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Vextari leaned forward in her chair. "What kind of ships?" "Unknown design," Kextel continued. "They appear to exist partially outside normal space-time. Our sensors can barely detect them, and when they do, the readings make no sense." "How many ships?" Zethkara asked. "Hundreds, possibly thousands. They're massing near the edge of human space." Morden spoke up from his engineering station. "Fleet Admiral, are they preparing to leave human space?" "We don't know," Kextal admitted. "But after 150 years of isolation, any movement from the humans is cause for concern." The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Harmony's Edge to contemplate this new development. "Helm," Zethkara ordered. "Set course. Away from the dead sector. Best possible speed." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, Vextari remained troubled by what she had learned. "Chief Morden," she said, "in your opinion, what do you think the humans have become?" The old engineer was quiet for a long time before answering. "I think they became exactly what they said they would become. Something we could not survive meeting." "But what does that mean?" Morden turned to face her with his ancient, tired eyes. "It means that when humanity chose isolation over slavery, they paid a price we cannot understand. And now, after 150 years of paying that price, they may be ready to collect payment from those who forced them to make that choice." Meanwhile, deep within the dead sector, on what had once been Earth, something that had once been human stood before a massive construction facility. The being looked human at first glance, but closer inspection revealed subtle differences. Its eyes reflected light in ways that suggested it could perceive dimensions beyond normal space-time. Its movements were too fluid, as if it existed in multiple locations simultaneously. "Report," it said to another figure nearby. "The fleet is nearly complete," the second being replied. 1,000 ships, each capable of existing in both normal space and the quantum field, and the crews ready. All volunteers from the latest generation. They have never known normal space-time, so they will not be affected by the transition. The first being nodded. It had once been called Admiral Kate Morrison, but that name belonged to a different species, in a different time. Now it was something else. Something that the galaxy had forced humanity to become. Begin the final preparations, it ordered. After 150 years of isolation, it's time for humanity to rejoin galactic civilization. Will we offer them the same choice we were given? The second being asked. The entity that had been Kate Morrison smiled, but it was not an expression any baseline human would recognize. Of course, we are not monsters. We will give them exactly the same choice the Council gave us, and if they refuse, then they will learn what we learned. That some choices have consequences that last forever. Across the dead sector, similar conversations were taking place on dozens of worlds. Humanity had not died during their isolation. They had grown, evolved, and adapted to their altered reality. They had become something new, something that could exist comfortably in the impossible spaces between dimensions. They had also become something that remembered every detail of their forced exile. On the border monitoring station at the edge of human space, automated systems detected the first signs of movement within the dead sector. Energy signatures, unlike anything in the galaxy's databases, began appearing on long-range sensors. The station's alien crew tried to interpret the readings, but their equipment couldn't process what it was detecting. Ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, crews that thought in ways that baseline consciousness couldn't comprehend, technology that rewrote the laws of physics as it operated. Station Commander Yulkoth, a member of the same species as the Harmony's Edges, communications officer, sent an urgent message to Council Command. Priority alert. The message read, human ships detected leaving the dead sector. Estimated fleet size, unknown. Technology level, beyond current understanding. Recommendation, immediate evacuation of all border systems. But the message would take hours to reach Council Command, and the human fleet was moving faster than anything in the galaxy had ever moved before. They existed partially outside normal space-time, which meant they could travel through dimensions that other species couldn't even perceive. The first human ship to cross the border in 150 years appeared without warning in the Proxima Centauri system. The Council patrol vessel stationed there, the Vigilant Watch, detected the arrival, but couldn't lock onto the target with any of their sensors. Captain Velteran, the same species as the ambassador who had delivered the Council's ultimatum to humanity so long ago, tried to open communications with the mysterious vessel. Unknown ship, this is Captain Velteran of the Galactic Council. You are entering restricted space. Please identify yourself. The response came not through normal communication channels, but directly into the minds of every crew member aboard the Vigilant Watch. The voice was calm, polite, and terrifyingly familiar. Captain Velteran, this is Admiral Morrison of the Human Space Forces. We have come to deliver a message to the Galactic Council. Admiral Morrison. Velteran checked his historical databases. That's impossible. Admiral Morrison died over a century ago. Death is a concept that applies to baseline humans. Captain, we are no longer baseline humans. Velteran felt a chill of fear unlike anything he had ever experienced. What is your message? The same message your people delivered to us 150 years ago. Surrender your military assets and submit to our guidance, or face the consequences. That's impossible. We are the Galactic Council. We have thousands of ships, millions of worlds. Captain, the voice in his mind said gently, we had a few hundred ships and a handful of worlds. You still demanded our surrender. Surely you understand that strength is relative. The human ship vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving the crew of the Vigilant Watch staring at empty space. But the message had been delivered, and it would spread throughout the galaxy within hours. Humanity had returned to galactic civilization. But they had returned as something that no other species could understand or resist. They had become the very thing the Council had tried to force them to become. An advanced species with the power to guide the development of younger races. The only difference was that humanity remembered what it felt like to be the younger race. They remembered the choice between freedom and submission, and they were prepared to offer that same choice to every species in the galaxy. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human guidance had begun, and across the galaxy, species that had forgotten the lessons of the human war were about to learn why no one enters human space, because everyone remembers the last time someone tried to make humanity surrender.